Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today in this Whitetria webinar. My name is Ben Manessi. I work here at Whitetria as head of product, and I'll be your host today. In today's webinar, we'll talk about everything regarding license management in SAP 35. We will start with a quick recap on who we are, on the off chance that you've just come in contact with us. We might have met at SPC or some of the conferences earlier. We will talk about a couple of the license management challenges that we keep hearing about from customers, and then we'll see a live demo of SAP 35 and how you can integrate it into your daily work as an administrator and someone who works with licenses in your Office 365 tenant. Couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section. We will be sure to get back to you. If I don't know the answer, we'll definitely follow up later on. So definitely ask questions. Let us know what you think about what you see here. Today's webinar is about 30 minutes, which is going to be challenging and rather fast. So I hope that you enjoy what you're going to see and let us know what you think. So a little bit of info about who we are. We've been founded in Montreal, Canada, headquartered here as well in '99. Been around for some time, and we actually started out in the IBM world. We are still present in the IBM software world. We've been working with enterprises, and we're lucky to have over 500 customers really all around the world. And so what we've been hearing is that a lot of these customers started migrating to Office 365, as well as we started going to these conferences, meeting a lot of Office 365 customers, and that is why we started development and actually went GA with SAP 35 last summer. So the product is coming up on 1 year. We're still thinking about the anniversary party. It has definitely evolved a lot, and we'll see it later on in action. Now, some of the challenges that we hear about from customers in terms of managing Office 365 licenses, one of these challenges is kind of goes with the rest of the administrative tasks in Office 365 is that you don't really have a proper dashboard to look at what your licensing situation is globally. So definitely you have to use PowerShell for anything that goes beyond one user, not to mention that these PowerShell reports are not really action enabled. So should you find something that is out of the ordinary, that requires a change, you need to write another PowerShell script, etc. So that is something we'll see live, how we address this, because the idea with SAP 365 is to give you a global overview of everything you have in Office 365, including users, groups, even licenses, and everything that we'll do is actually action enabled. The second challenge here is, of course, you're paying for these licenses, right? Quite a bit in some cases. So you want to be sure that those licenses are consumed in an effective way. So one of these things that tends to happen is that we don't really like to hard remove users, which would be doable in PowerShell, because even though in that case the license automatically goes back to the license pool, this is sort of a permanent solution. So what we're seeing with customers is that they end up disabling accounts most of all the time. And when you do that, the license is still being consumed by that user, right? So this is effectively wasting those user licenses. That's just one example. Not to mention the ability to sort of oversee some of those higher value licenses, whether that's about Project Premium or E5. You want to be sure that they're in the right places, consumed in the right way. So we'll take a look at this a bit later. We'll take a look at the service plans that are part of these higher value licenses. We'll see how to sort of extrapolate the usage and adoption of these licenses and service plans from the SAP 365 dashboard. And the third big challenge that we'll talk about today is license consumption and how you actually tie the consumption back to the cost center that requested the license. So one of the specific examples that we hear about for multinational companies, but also companies that are just in multiple locations, right, is that they would usually have cost centers in each of the countries where they're present. And should one of those countries request a set of, for example, E5 licenses, right, there is no real way of making sure that those licenses are effectively consumed in that country, and this causes a lot of confusion and issues. So how can we make sure that we know how many licenses each of these geolocations? And I'm trying to refrain from talking about countries here, because we could talk about departments, we could talk about faculty versus students, or countries, or pretty much anything. How do we make sure that those licenses get consumed in the right place? We will see all of this live as well. We have our role-based access control module that we introduced in the previous webinar. We'll take a look at how to set this up in a way that you can actually assign license delegation quotas to specific users and administrators for your geolocations per department or country or any other user property. So these are sort of the three challenges that we'll take a look at today. Let me give you a little bit of an intro, because I know we have some people here who've never used the product before. So just get this out of the way real quick. So the product's name is Sapio 365. Essentially, this is a locally installed unified administration client for Office 365. Simplicity is extremely important to us. So you go on our website, whitetria.com, download Sapio 365 in 2 clicks, get it installed, create a new admin session, and you're already connected into your tenant. What's very important for us as well is security. So as opposed to some of the other vendors out there, we make sure that none of your data actually goes through us. So this is a locally installed software client on your computer that is directly connected into your tenant, and none of the data actually flows through us in any way. So you're completely secure. Now, the way that this locally installed piece of software actually gets access to your tenant is through Azure AD registered applications. These are sort of the passport or driver's license that gives Sapio 365 access to your tenant, right? However, it's only the Sapio 365 client that gets the access that's on your computer. So we as Whitetria don't have access to your tenant. Now, what you can do with this product is we have a lot of different modules. We can work with users, groups, teams, OneDrive, and a lot more. And we'll see the license management part today. The idea is that you get all of your data in a dashboard that you can analyze, that you can export information from in a couple clicks, as well as you can do bulk updates, right? So everything that you'll see in this tool is action-enabled. And as for license management, we can do analysis on licenses for every single user, including service plans, bulk updates, and even apply these license quotas. So having said that, let's actually dive in and take a look at the product. So I'm going to start with the Sapio 365 screen. Normally, we would work with users to look at their licenses, but I do want to show a quick module here that is for the license products and services. So this is part of the tenant level information that we give you in Sapio 365. So I'm connected into my tenant, and this is really just a quick module to help me understand what are the licenses that my organization has purchased, how many of those licenses have I consumed globally, and what do those licenses actually entail? What are the service plans that are part of these licenses? This is also, this is just a quick overview. It's really not a huge deal. It's just a good place to look at your global situation. And this is where I want to introduce the Job Center, which we'll see and use later today as well. We have this Job Center in every single module. And the idea is that the Job Center automates tasks that you might need multiple times a day or quite regularly. So one of the things that we can do is we can actually automate chart creation based on whatever grid data. So here I have an example of creating a quick chart based on the licenses that my organization has procured. And it will basically just give me an idea of how many licenses I have, how many of those have I consumed, how many of those do I have left in the organization. I just wanted to show this real quick. We're actually working on a lot more job centers, so prepare to be seeing a lot more chart options here and there. So that's the global license situation. Now let's actually take a look at my users and see how we can deal with these challenges that we talked about. Now, I'm using what we call an ultra admin session here. So this is actually an application that I have registered in my own tenant, which means I'm in control of what this application can do. In this case, the application will allow me to work with users and really all aspects of users. So in this case, we're going to just use the licenses module, but as you can see, there's a whole lot more that we could do. I encourage you to go on our website. We've got a couple of videos and recorded webinars about some of the other modules as well. So I've got all of my users loaded up in the grid. Now, this interface, we call it the FlexiGrid. It's actually a framework that we've been working on for over 15 years, and we've put a lot of energy into this. It's an extremely powerful way to display and analyze data. So one of the things that you'll notice right away is that we can show you all of the possible user information, so pretty much everything about your users in one interface. And this includes your assigned licenses. So I can right away see any users that are unlicensed, as well as I can see what are the licenses assigned to these users. In fact, one of the things you can do in this FlexiGrid is you can drag and drop column headers into this area, and with that, we'll basically categorize whatever information is displayed in the grid by whatever column you have selected. So I use the Shift minus shortcut here to collapse my selection, and I can right away see what are the licenses and how many users do I have with those licenses. Now, this is not yet the licenses module. It's just an interface for you to really look at all of your users and see all of your information in one place. If we wanted to use the licenses module, which we do, we're going to select one or multiple users. In my case, I picked everybody, and I'm going to pull up the licenses module real quick. Now, what we get with the licenses module is, first of all, we'll see every user that we've selected, and we'll see whatever licenses they have assigned to them, including the global status on those licenses. So, for example, for the Enterprise Mobility plus Security E5, we have a total amount of 26 purchased licenses, out of which we've already consumed 24. We can also see suspended and warning status licenses assigned to users, as well as I could actually say, show me the unassigned licenses, which will basically give me all of my users, and I can actually see what are the total amount of licenses that I have, all the types of licenses I have, and I can see for each user, what are the licenses that are assigned to them. So for example, Bianca here does not have any of these licenses assigned to them. All right, now what we could also do is we could actually quickly grab the SKU part number column, look at it by the licenses that we have assigned to people. So this is something we've already seen. And in fact, with the grouping mechanism, we can actually use as many layers of groupings as we want to. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually taking a look at what is the license use location. So I've got all of my licenses, and I can see how many of those licenses are being used in the different countries where my companies present. One of the other very important things about the FlexiGrid is that anything and everything that you see can be exported. In fact, it's as easy as selecting it and then doing a Control-C, Control-V to get this information into an Excel sheet, for example. All right, it's always what you see. So if I wanted to take everything here or just a subset of this data, I could always just select that and dump it into my Excel sheet so that I can format it later on. But as you can see, the format is already pretty acceptable. So one of the things that I'm hearing from some of our customers is that the biggest ROI for them in using SAP 365 is with reporting, as in they would usually spend 2 to 3 hours every week just doing their license-related reporting. And the issue is not even the PowerShell scripting, right? Because you can find everything in PowerShell online. The issue is more formatting that CSV in the end. And so what one of my customers told me is that out of the 2-3 hours of reporting that they need to do a week, they can actually do it with SAP 365 in about 20 minutes, which at the end of the day really brings a lot of value. So that's how you can export information in a really, really easy way. All right, so what else do we show here? We can see all of our users and the licenses that are assigned to them. However, we can also dig deeper and actually look at the service plans that are part of these licenses, as well as the service plan statuses for all of those users, which is something really, really cool. What we can see, for example, is the status of service plans. So I can see if the service plan was successfully provisioned. I can see if a service plan is pending activation, pending input. This is really important data, right? So if I look at this by SKU part number, I'll see that I've got a whole lot of service plans that are part of my EMS Premium licenses where we're waiting for input. Now, what this means is that the license hasn't been provided yet, which means that for all of these services, we're basically paying for nothing because they're not actually being used. So this is a way to sort of look at the adoption data based on your license situation. The idea would be to make sure that all of your licenses are properly and service plans are properly provisioned and being used by your end users. So that is one of the things that we can do here. Another example that I think is really cool is, well, of course, we can look at all of our users by our service plan name, right? So I can quickly find out, okay, which of my users have Exchange Foundation, which of them have Exchange Enterprise. I can quickly locate um, disabled service plans, which tends to happen sometimes with the Exchange service plans, interestingly enough. One of the interesting scenarios that came up with a customer recently was they told us they had a requirement that they needed to do pretty regularly, which was to check for any project premium service plans that were assigned over 3 months ago. The reasoning behind this was that that is a pretty expensive license. And because it's project, it's also used and usually consumed on a project basis. So any of the users that received this service plan over 3 months ago, chances are that they're not using it anymore. So what this customer would do is they would regularly check for any of these licenses assigned over an X period of time ago. So they asked for a way to simplify this, and we created a job center job for it. So this is the find service plans assigned before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this real quick. We're actually going to use a project-related service plan. So we're going to use the project work management service plan and show me everything that was assigned over a month ago, right? Now this is a demo tenant, so I don't have 3 months, but let's see what we get with this. Essentially, with these job center jobs, the idea is that we do things that you could also do in the FlexiGrid, but you don't need to know the FlexiGrid so well. So these job center jobs do all the work for you. Now, in the case of this customer, anything that they would have found, they would try and remove those service plans and see if the users complain, and if they do, they would give it back. So it brings us to the point that everything that we see here is action enabled. I can select one or multiple of these users and edit their licenses. In fact, we can edit it in a way that we can also automatically dive into the service plans and say, I want to take the project work management out of the licenses and the service plans that is available to those users. All right. So that's a way to edit licenses really, really quickly. If you have any requirements that are similar that would make sense for us to build a job center job for, you can quickly click on the suggest new job option and just tell us what you want to see here, and we'll do it for you. So that is how we can automate certain tasks in the SAP 365 interface. All right. Another example that was pretty cool, came up with a customer recently as well, was they started using Office 365 not a very long time ago, and they purchased E5 licenses for everybody, but they were not yet ready to use Teams, right? So the question was, at the time, they turned the Teams off, and now they started being ready, so they wanted to roll Teams out to everybody. So one of the things that you can do to look at that is to look at the service plan name and then categorize them by license status. So this will show me that out of the Teams licenses that I have, all of them are disabled at the moment, right? Because I wasn't ready to roll that out to all of my users. So I'm going to quickly select all these 25 users, and basically we're ready for Teams now. So we're going to go into the Enterprise Premium pack and basically assign Teams and allow the use of Teams to everybody, hit apply. And this is where we can modify multiple users and basically do anything we ever need to do with licenses for multiple users, all without PowerShell. Now, what I just did is I basically changed the service plans assigned to users. So you can see we indicate something's been edited, but we've always been very careful in that bulk changes can be a bit risky. So if you want to be sure that these changes are correct, you take a look at it, and once it's done, you can hit Save All, and that is actually going to make those changes final. All right? So that's how you can quickly modify service plans and assign them to multiple users in one place. Now, a few other things that are pretty cool. So one of the things you can do is you can look at users without any licenses. Just a reminder for customers on the call, as you very well know, SAP 365 is licensed per end user in your tenant, excluding service accounts without any licenses. So we only take into consideration accounts that actually have licenses assigned to them. So what we're looking at here is I use the Job Center job to basically take a look at who are the users that are not licensed at all, right? So it's pretty simple. And another thing that you can do is you can actually use some of the Job Center jobs from the user's interface as well, because we have some license related Job Center jobs here as well. I keep hitting reset because reset basically goes back to the default grid configuration. It's a pretty handy way to reset whatever you've done to the grid format. Now, one of the things that we can do here is we can actually look at licenses of sign-in blocked users. And if you remember, this is one of those scenarios that is effectively wasting licenses, and so it's actually wasting money. So these are the users that are currently disabled, and these are the licenses that are assigned to them. So we can see that both of these users have two E5 licenses assigned to them, one Enterprise Mobility and Security and an E5 Enterprise. So what we're going to do is we're going to edit those licenses and take these licenses away from both users. Now, if we were to be afraid that these users lose their emails or whatever, usually what happens is when you disable a user account, the user account is still there for 30 days. In fact, if you take the licenses away, if they had an Exchange mailbox, that will still be there for a grace period of 30 days. So there's really no risk in taking those licenses away as long as we can be sure within 30 days that the user really leaves the organization. So that's how we can quickly find any licenses assigned to users that are disabled from logging in. I'm not saving my changes because I keep doing these demos, so I don't want to ruin my environment, but hope you take my word for it that it just works. All right, and the last one, before we wrap things up, we talked about this license consumption question, right? How do we make sure that the licenses are actually consumed where they were purchased for, right? So what we can do here to work with the license consumption and delegation is we can use a global admin account to set up our role-based access control. Now, the role-based access control can be configured here in the SAP 365 settings interface. You need to be a global admin to do this. And a bit of background info, the idea with RBAC is that you can set up specific roles for your SAP 365 users. So you can create predefined groups of administrators and allow them to do and not do certain things in SAP 365. Now, I'm going to focus more on the license management side of things. I have created a regional administrator role for Canada. And this actually goes beyond licensing a little bit because one of the pains that we keep hearing about is that customers want to delegate certain administration tasks to admins for a specific region, right? We've heard this from universities as well, is what if you want to create an admin role that only looks after your students in a certain country, but not the faculty, stuff like that. So we have created a regional administrator role for Canada where we have to supply a set of credentials. Full disclosure, the credentials is a combination of a global admin unlicensed service account and an Azure AD application. And then we can set up the permissions that come with this role. So I can basically select any of the 72 SAP 365 actions and handpick whatever I want to allow or not allow these administrators to do. Now, in this case, this is a regional admin role. I do not want to limit what those users can do. So I did not apply any restrictions on the permission side of things. However, I do want to allow them to work with licenses, but I want to limit the amount of licenses that they can work with. So this is the idea of license pools, essentially. I'm going to say that the EMS premium, so the Enterprise, E5, Mobility, and Security, I have a total of 26 licenses. Now, I know that the Canadian users are about 8 users, so I'm only going to let my administrators in Canada work with 8 of these licenses, all right? Same goes for Enterprise Premium and the Enterprise Pack. So I'm just going to hit OK. I have created my role limitations for licensing. Another thing that's important for these RBAC roles is that we can also assign scopes to these roles. So one of the scopes that I have assigned here is a user-related scope, which will basically make the regional administrator role only work with users where the country value equals Canada. So this is a scope that limits who they can work with. All right. Now, another useful and important piece of info is that for this RBAC to work, you need a valid Azure subscription because we are using a Cosmos DB in the background. This is going to be in your tenant for security purposes, so we don't have access to it. This is where the SAP 365 credentials as well as user activity logs are going to be stored in a central place. So we use Cosmos DB for this. In fact, you can set up your Cosmos DB connection information on this panel. So let's see all of this live, right? I'm going to head over to Emily, who's the regional administrator for Canada. So I basically assigned that regional admin role to her in the same interface that we were looking at before. I have logged in with Emily's account. I can quickly look at the role information, which gives me a quick recap on what I can and cannot do. And when I pull up my users, we'll see that the set of users that will appear actually are only the users that are located in Canada. So as opposed to looking at everybody in the tenant, we can only work with our Canadian users. So you can see that the addresses are kind of bogus here, but the country is Canada, and that was the idea to set up. Now I'm going to go into the licenses module for the users that I'm allowed to administer, and we'll see that we have two additional columns coming up. Not only do we see the global consumed and enabled license situation, which is the tenant level info, but I can also see that I have a total of 8 RBAC scope enabled EMS premium licenses, out of which I have already consumed 7. All right. So if I was to edit licenses for users, we would actually be seeing that if I was to assign an enterprise pack, because I don't have any more available, I would not be able to assign those licenses, even though I might have some spare left on the tenant level. So that is how we can enforce certain license quotas for specific regions. This was an example with the Canadian regional administrator setup, but you can always use a department to identify these different units, as well as we've had a customer who the company is pretty aggressive on the acquisition side of things. So they have a lot of subsidiaries in a lot of different countries. So they ended up using the distinguished 80 name on-prem as an indicator of which subsidiary company those users belong to, and created their RBAC roles for SAP 365 according to that specific string. So the possibilities here really are unlimited. If you ever need any help with any of this, would be happy to set this up for you. And going back to my presentation, just to finish on time, if you guys are interested in any of this, let us know. You can download the product from our website and automatically start a 7-day full trial, no questions asked, right? However, if you want to learn more, would love to set a meeting with you, show you the product pretty quickly, and hook you up with a longer license key. That is not a problem at all. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at sales@whitetrade.com or support@whitetrade.com. I would love to know what you thought. Let us know via email or chat. And thank you again so much for taking the time out to join us today.